Ethiopia has expressed disappointment with the latest U.S. efforts to resolve a long-running dispute over a major dam on the Nile River. Ethiopia boycotted talks in Washington this week, saying negotiations with Egypt and Sudan are far from over. Ethiopia says the dam is essential to its development, but Egypt is worried about its effect on irrigation and drinking water.
Well, Allam Ahmed is a professor of knowledge management and sustainable development at the University of East London. He joins me now in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us here on Al Jazeera. So what do you make of the fact that Ethiopia has rejected the draft agreement and that ultimately Ethiopia is already talking about beginning to fill the dam when the reality is a lot of things haven't been sorted out with the crucial other countries, Sudan, but mainly Egypt?
Thank you, Barbara. I think the main issue here is that if we go back when this whole project started, many people have asked for transparency on this particular project, the technical reporting about the risk and all that stuff. And also, Ethiopia have not been very clear many years ago when they started this in terms of their neighbors, which is particularly Egypt and Sudan. So I think the rhetoric from Ethiopia, for example, they're going to start filling in July, that's not helpful. The second thing is they have been continuously not giving much to the public domain, which is quite important. But we have to be wise of the fact that Egypt depends quite heavily on the Nile, on the water, on that river, for food, for security, for lots of stuff. Although Egypt claim 90% of they depend on 90% from that water, but even some statistics saying 80 or 78, it doesn't matter. But imagine someone is going to siphon all this water in a very short time, as according to the Egyptian, all technical advisors. It's quite serious. It could be considered, even if you like, national risk for the country. So what the Egyptians are proposing is 12 to 20 years, while the Ethiopians are 4 to 7. So I think I still don't understand why, in the first place, the Egyptians have taken this to the US, because it's quite a clear matter. The Ethiopians should have really cooperated well with Sudan and Egypt. Also, don't have to forget, Sudan has been shockingly or shamefully not really been engaged in this process. But at some point, we will also get Sudan after Ethiopia, because Sudan currently has its own internal affairs of trying to rebuild the country and all that settlement. But when they recover from this, they will also be asking key questions to Ethiopia about the ownership of the land, the risk and the hazard from this dam to affect Sudan. So Ethiopia has to get its record right quickly before this escalates to a regional, actually, conflict.
I mean, you mentioned the potential risk to Egypt. I mean, often the phrase I read is that it could be almost an existential risk because of the value of water, especially in countries that are so warm. So is it mainly a sort of lack of being able to do a proper risk assessment? Or do you think there is always going to be a sort of imbalance between the different needs of 2, 3 really different nations?
I think it's a good question. Number one, Ethiopia should give them more clarity and more, simply should open for them all the technical report they have about this issue. And secondly, the Ethiopian, they should really listen, and the Egyptian sit together, the engineers. I always argued for technical expert to sit down, not really as a politician, about this, because they're saying 4 to 7, and these Egyptians are saying. But the Egyptians themselves, they have something to be blamed for. For many years, many reports have criticized Egypt for not managing the water currently they are using effectively. So there's lots of water being lost in the Egyptian side. So the Egyptians themselves, they have to raise up their bar technically in terms of managing the water they currently have. So the issue is going to escalate, particularly when Sudan will come on board sooner, I think, not later.
Just very briefly then, if the US doesn't manage to I guess, get the parties together, what avenues are open to a country like Egypt?
Avenues, for example, the Ethiopian, I think a month ago, the Ethiopian government have asked, for example, South African president, who is going to take the African Union presidency, to intervene. But I think the best thing I always argued, the 3 of them should really do this internally. The 3 of them are quite good neighbors, particularly Ethiopia with Sudan and Egypt and Sudan, all of them. And they should really hand it over to technical expertise first. I think the politics here is quite dangerous. So it has to be technically handled first and then politically massaged, if you like.
All right. Allam Ahmed, Professor of Knowledge in Management and Sustainable Development at the University of East London. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure.